Hey everybody, it's Professor Parrish. I hope you all are doing great. So we're in week 14 and I'm actually getting this video out on time. So you'll actually get it at the early part of the week like you should, right? So just to preface, as I'm recording this, it is late Sunday night. So far it looks like most of you have turned in paper number 3, our narration paper. If you have not, you have until 11:55 today to turn it in. I am going to be grading those this week along with your other assignments. I did post to the week 12 or week 13 rather discussion forum, and so I'm probably going to be posting in our discussion forums on Fridays from here on in, just check in with everybody and make sure everything's going good. But I really appreciate the posts that you all have put up for week 13. I'm excited to read your narration papers and get them back to you. And we are pushing now into the final paper of the class. So we're going to talk about, we're going to briefly touch base on narration, or not narration, on argument this week, and talk a little bit about it and what I'm kind of expecting with this last paper. And then as the weeks go on, we're going to talk more in depth about research. We're going to talk about citation, because I am going to look a little bit closer with citation with this last paper, especially considering that most of you are going to be taking English 121 next, and you will be doing citation with that paper. So I want to kind of let this be a nice prep for that with our final push for the end of the semester. It's week 14. We really only have 3 to 4 weeks of class left if you include finals. So less than a month. So if you have been dealing with everything going on around the world and you're like, man, I'm really ready for this semester to be over, we're in the final push. So please stay with us. You guys can do it. I know things are stressful right now. There's a lot going on, but I really think these last few weeks there's going to be a lot of points up for grabs. Don't let your grades slip. Keep moving forward. Keep raising your grade, doing what you can to get through this semester. It'll be so rewarding when you do and finals week is over. So with that being said, I won't waste any more time. I'm going to minimize myself here, and we're going to go and talk about week 14. So there are 3 assignments this week for week 14. You will notice there's only one small chapter to look at, and that's chapter 16. This is the chapter on argumentation. So if you answered the discussion forum and you were kind of unsure about what exactly I'm going to be looking for with this argument paper, please read chapter 16, because it goes into a lot of depth in our textbook about argument, about how that's set up, and I really think it's a good chapter to kind of focus on for this week, especially prepping us for talking about the paper itself. So the discussion forum, I'm going to kind of open up over here, and we're going to talk about it first, the discussion forum. So in this discussion forum, we're going to go back to Lindsay Ellis this week with this video. It's not anything too crazy long. It's all about narration. We're finishing up narration and going into argumentation with this discussion forum. So her video talks about how we should have narrators for our stories, but what happens if they're unreliable? And I chose this video because I think it's a nice bridge between us talking about narration and bridging into argumentation, because someone mentioned in the discussion forum that you have to be careful with research because sometimes it's biased or it's not true. And in the fiction world, we call that an unreliable narrator, where the narrator's been telling us the story and we, the audience, find out as the story goes on that maybe the narrator's lying. Maybe they're not telling the truth. And us as readers, we have to figure out, okay, well, what do we do with that? And I think that as researchers for our final papers, we also have to deal with that. We're like, what if I find a biased source? What if I find out my source isn't correct? What do I do with that information then? So I chose this video to kind of bridge the gap between our 3rd paper and our 4th paper, to talk about unreliable narrators, what we do with them, why they exist, and why authors use them. So I want you to just keep in the back of your head this idea of, okay, if I find a biased source for my paper, or a source that I discover later is unreliable, what do I do with that? And I want that to kind of be the question in the back of your mind. And so the discussion forum this week is just having the video being watched. It's not a long video. It won't take you too much time. And then answering these 3 questions about that. So that being said, that is the discussion forum for week 14. We're down to our last two grammar reviews. I know you all are so excited. Grammar review number 9, I'm going to pull it up here. Bring myself over here. Nope. Nope. Okay. All right. So on page 536 to 543, we're talking about quotation marks. And we've done a little bit with quotation marks, but this is just a review. So on page 538, numbers 1 through 10, you are just rewriting the sentences and placing quotation marks around the proper points. So there's likely going to be dialogue. I want to know, where do you put those quotation marks in terms of the dialogue? Where do you put quotation marks when conversations end and are interrupted? I just want to make sure that you understand where to put quotation marks, because when we start to research, if you find a quotation from a source you really like, you can put that in your paper as long as it has quotation marks. If you don't use quotation marks for a direct copied source or citation or quotation, it is considered plagiarism, and that will result in a poor grade on your paper. And we'll talk more about that next week when we get into the writing prep for paper number 4, but just keep that in mind. And then number 5, 1 through bottom, is the exact same thing. You're just adding quotation marks where they are appropriate. So it's just a little bit of practice. This assignment should be fairly easy, just mainly making sure that you understand where to put quotation marks, especially when we use citations or things like that. All right. So going back to our final assignment for this week is the reading response number 2. It always picks the weirdest time to do these little Dropbox things. I'm not sure why. Okay. Let me find the right paper there. Here we go. All right. So I teach English 109, and I also teach English 122. I don't usually teach 121. But in English 122, when you eventually get to that class, we do a segment on fiction. It's a literature-based course, so we talk about fiction, poetry, and drama in English 122. And when we talk about fiction, I like to bring up these 2 novels. They're called Beautiful Boy and Tweak. And they recently made a movie about Beautiful Boy, so I don't know if any of you have seen it. I actually have not seen the movie because I really liked the book, and I'm afraid the movie won't live up to the hype of the book. I'm sure you understand that feeling if you're a reader like me. So I've not watched the movie, but basically what the books are about is that Nick Sheff, he was a young man who found himself struggling with drug addiction, and while he was in rehab, he wrote a memoir about his experiences and about what got him on drugs, what that was like, what happened to him, and it was kind of like a therapeutic way he could write about his experience and help to get him out of addiction and stay off of it. So that's Tweak. His father, David Sheff, is a journalist and decided to simultaneously, while his son is writing this story, he decided to write his own account of being a father and having to reconcile, like, what did he cause his son to become addicted to drugs? What part did he play? What part does he play now in his son's rehabilitation? And so the 2 men wrote these stories around the same time. In one of my grad classes, we had to read both of these novels and then discuss how they were similar and different. So for this reading response, we obviously aren't going to be able to read an entire book, and even in English 122, we don't read the whole book. But what I want you to do is to watch this video. It's basically these 2 men talking about their relationship and about recounting addiction and writing about it. And then afterwards, there's this short article on memory. And the big thing about these 2 gentlemen and their stories is that they both write about the same events happening at the same time. But the way that they write about them is different because they are each remembering these moments from a different perspective. So this New Scientist article talks about memory and how 2 different people can recount the same event differently. So it can be a factual event that's actually happened, but these 2 people remember it in different ways. And so the article just briefly talks about that. But what I want you to do is watch this short video, read this short article, And then there are 3 questions here below that your reading response should answer. And the whole thing should be about a page long, double spaced, which really isn't that long. And you can go over that if you need to. But I just want to know, how do they have different but similar memories? How does the article on memory relate to this? Nick's memory could be skewed due to his addiction. So, and David is an outsider on Nick's life. So can we treat either as a reliable narrator? So we're tying back to the discussion forum. Can we treat them as a reliable narrator? Either one, why or why not? And then finally, how does this idea of narration help us to understand how we can have differing views on a situation or a memory? So I really like this reading response. I'm excited about it. I really want to know what your perspective is. And so I'm very curious to see what you all take out of this video and this article. If you get a chance, since we are, social distancing and needing things to do, I've had friends that are working on puzzles. I can't stand puzzles. I don't know how they're completing them. But I can think of 1,000 things I'd rather do than do a puzzle. But that's just me. But if you are like me and puzzles are not your thing and you need something to do, I highly recommend, if you can get an ebook version or order Tweak or Beautiful Boy. They are both so good. They're really interesting stories, especially if you like reading memoirs or personal nonfiction accounts of real life people. I recommend both of them. But that is our reading response. So just to give you all a heads up of the weeks to come, that's week 14. You've got the grammar review on quotation marks, you've got your discussion forum, and you've got this reading response that's going to be due next Sunday, April 19th. Week 15 coming up, we'll talk about the argument paper. We're going to talk about that assignment, and then you're going to have basically 2 weeks to work on the paper. So I know I said in the last lecture video I was going to talk about citations, but I want to wait till we get a little bit closer. I want you all to kind of get a grasp on what you want to write about first, and then we'll talk about sources. But you do have a week to think about what you might be interested in doing, and then next week in week 15 we're going to talk about the argument paper in more detail and what exactly is going to be entailed with that topic. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm excited to read your narration papers and get those back to you. I'm very excited about the assignments this week for week 14, especially the Tweak and Beautiful Boy assignments, because I really liked those two books. I'm excited to hear your take on them as far as the video goes and the article. I hope you all had a very good Easter weekend. If you don't celebrate Easter, I still hope you had a great weekend and a great Sunday as well. We're coming into week 14. We're in the home stretch now. We have 1 paper left and the other assignments. It's going to fly by really quickly. But as always, if you have any questions for me, I am working remotely from home, so I will have office hours where I'm on my computer working on things from about 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. I've got enough to keep me busy between now and then. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. But otherwise, I'm so excited for you all to be in the final weeks of this class. Let me know if you have questions, but otherwise, have a great week. And I'll talk to you all again when we come back for week 15.